Hey, I'm Josh Moisan, and this is my FMOD and Unity implementation demo. All the audio you'll hear was made with a Rode NT1, a stereo pair of EM272s. Typically for field recordings, I like using them on a space stereo bar or in a tree ears config for a pseudo binaural recording, as well as an extensive collection of personal and professional sound libraries that I've been creating/collecting over the years. For software, I use Reaper mostly for editing, sound design, mixing, and mastering, but I also use Ableton for music sometimes, a bunch of VSTs like Phase Plant, Serum, as well as physical synths like my Eurorack modular synth. First thing I had to do was think of a game idea for the demo. I Fall Apart has you play as the Eye, one of the many sentient pieces of a madman's most recent experiment to create their own human. The experiment was a failure, and now all the body parts are scattered throughout the facility. If you can use the Eye's abilities to reconnect with them, maybe you can finally put an end to the madman's experiments. Or will you fall apart just like last time? Even though this is a small project with only 31 audio assets, a sound list was essential to keeping track of the project's progress, revisions, implementations, and managing the scope. We can break down the game's audio into 5 main groups: rolling, pickup, ambience, 3D room, and music. Let's start with the player's movement sounds in the rolling event. I wanted to get the sound to feel like it was responding to the player's speed as they move around. Since there is no animations to hook into, I was able to get creative with how I implemented the movement sounds. Using the player's speed and FMOD scatter instrument, I automated volume, pitch, and spawn rate of the scatter to help get the responsiveness I was after. I adjusted the spawn interval and ensured the min and max distance were both set to 0 so that the sounds would not be spatialized, as well as activating spawn stealing and reducing the polyphony. This reduces the amount of audio clutter when moving around, and allows the spawn rate changes to take effect immediately instead of waiting for each file to finish. Now that the player is moving, let's look at how we progress by looking at the pickup event. The pickups were a lot of fun to create, but also needed extra care to make sure the immersion of the game was kept as top priority. In this demo, the pickups represent body parts that you're attaching to the player to create a makeshift body. They also automatically open the next locked door. This is to simulate the pickup giving you the ability to get to the next area. For the implementation, I used a multi-instrument to shuffle a variety of body part pickup sounds. I wanted these sounds to stay stereo so you can really hear the body part whooshing by and snapping into place. I also used a snapshot here to ensure this sound is heard no matter the context. This works like a sidechain in music. When the pickup gets triggered, the snapshot will drop all the relevant groups just for a moment to give the pickup some time to shine. The pickups do a lot to immerse the player, but let's look at how the ambience really fills out this world. The game starts each run with no music, to heighten the player's sense of isolation and helplessness. It's not till they pick up the first body part that the music comes in. So in this project, the immersion really starts with the ambience. I'm using a 3D event emitter in Unity to spatialize different layers. This level's layers break into 3 main groups. The static loop, which is 20 to 30 seconds of a perfect loop of room tone to help establish the size of the space. This loop is not spatialized. Then there's 2 scatter instrument layers that are spatialized. One is machine clanks, cranks, grinds, your typical machine sounds. And then the other one I call hisses, which is steam, wind gust, gas, the power of the machines moving around. Being a 3D emitter allows the scatter instruments to be spatialized in that area. This does a lot to fill out the world and keep the ambience fresh throughout multiple attempts. The next event we'll look at, the 3D room, takes the ideas we established in the ambience and narrows the range to a specific object in the level. This room is a great example of what a more fleshed out level could sound like, where different points of interest have emitters attached to them to give the player audio cues that line up with the visual cues. For this example, I'm using screams to show that another experiment is in this room. Don't worry, nobody was harmed in making these sounds. What you're hearing are the pleasing tones of an Aztec death whistle. The implementation was accomplished with another 3D emitter and a scatter instrument. We're just using the scatter instrument for its spawn interval parameters. The scatter distance will be set to 0 so that it's not spatialized. Also ensuring the polyphony is set to 1 so that there are no conflicting triggers. Both the 3D room and reverb room in this level use a combination of snapshots and event emitters to build out their environments. This allows a unique audio experience for each room. Similar to real acoustics, the high frequencies get filtered to represent the absorption properties of the walls, but for this demo it functions to make sure each feature of the room is clearly audible. I could have given both rooms unique reverbs, but wanted to have the 3D room dry to show off the effects of the spatialized screams. The reverb room, however, definitely has reverb, and a similar low-pass effect to make sure you can hear everything clearly. Now that the vibe is set, let's see how the music really sets the tone. The music uses a dynamic vertical remixing system that I integrated into the body part pickup logic. As the player progresses throughout the level, the soundtrack will build up in intensity. As the player gets closer to the end of the level and success seems attainable, the pressure of failures increase through the music. In FMOD, I'm using that same parameter I mentioned to determine what layers are active and when it's time to transition to a stinger. Once that sound concludes, it will start the transition stinger while the level resets. Thank you so much for checking out my demo. If you have any questions or ideas, my contact is available on my website provided below.